There's a simple trick to instantly improve your compositions without resorting to the boring old rule of thirds or others like it. And in this video, I'll give you 3 quick questions to ask yourself before you click the shutter to guarantee balanced, unique compositions without relying on these formulaic one-size-fits-all rules. First, it's important to understand why just following things like the rule of thirds or the golden ratio could be harming your photography and not helping it. Because these rules are nothing more than guides for lining things up within your frame, and they completely miss the one thing that's going to set your photo apart from the crowd. Just think about it. If all you had to do to create an amazing composition was follow the rule of thirds or the golden ratio, then everyone's photos would be 10 out of 10, right? It's just like in sports. Like, who's the greatest ever player in your favorite sport? They play to a set of rules for their game, but are they great because they follow those rules or because they're adding something extra? Like, 2 of the greatest football players of all time are Messi and Ronaldo. And when they take the field, is everyone shouting, "Yeah, you really played by the rules today, woo"? Or are they going, "Holy shit, did you see that goal he scored? What a screamer." I mean, this is a goal and this is a goal. They're both a goal and they both count for the same within the rules, but one is just a little bit more special than the other. And it's the same in photography. A composition isn't great because it follows a set of rules. It's great because it does something extra. So the question is, how do you add your own special extra something to your compositions to make them stand out from the rest? And like I said, it comes down to asking yourself these 3 questions right before you click the shutter. And if you like videos about composition and you want me to make more, click that like button to let me know. So question 1. Now, don't write this off. It's more nuanced than it first seems. What do I want the viewer to look at? Yes, like I said, it sounds obvious, but here's the thing. It's not the same as asking what's the main subject, because you can have a great subject on one hand, but that's probably not the only thing you want the viewer to actually see in your photo. So asking yourself where you actually want the viewer to look forces you to think about what other elements to include and which to leave out. For example, do you want the photo to focus on just one single subject, or are you going to show the subject within a wider scene? And what else within that scene do you want the viewer to look at specifically? A stream, trees, rocks, the horizon, the sun, the leading lines. Once you decide on the things you want the viewer to look at, line up your initial composition that includes all of them. Now, this does not mean doing the same thing as what many people end up sleepwalking into with their compositions, me included. So, let me know in the comments if you're ever guilty of this too. But what I'm not talking about here is just cranking your wide angle lens as wide as it will go to make sure you capture the entire epic scene. Now, once you've done this and you've captured that initial composition, the next 2 questions are going to help you tweak it and hone it to make it the best version of itself. Question 2, what can I add or remove? You've lined up your first composition, it includes all the things you want the viewer to look at. Now's time to think about what you can add or remove from the composition to improve it. One reason to add something that you didn't originally include would be maybe to give the scene a bit more additional context. So, for example, if you want a wide open feeling to your photo, then include more sky, even though it's not necessarily a subject. Or, for example, you could include something that has a recognizable size and it gives the image a sense of scale. Putting yourself or someone else in the frame is a popular way to do that, especially when there's nothing else in the scene that tells you how big it really is. Another reason to add something might be to, say, give the composition depth. For example, if all your key elements are somewhat distant, then including a foreground element can do exactly that. It's also important to remove things from the composition that take away from what it is you want the viewer to look at. Sometimes you'll have to do this in editing, yes, but thinking about it now is going to help you craft the best possible composition in camera. Now, the eye's drawn to many things, whether we like it or not. Things with a lot of visual weight, like big or high contrast objects, distracting objects, things that feel incomplete, like something cut off, unsatisfying at the edge of the frame, dead space, and so on. So take a look around your composition for everything that isn't your answer to question 1 and ask yourself, does this add or take away from what I want the viewer to actually be looking at? And like I said, sometimes it's impossible to eliminate everything you don't want the viewer to focus on. So a lot of it can be done in editing, and I'll share some extra tips on how to do that right after question 3. Is the composition balanced? Now, this is where you can use various rules like the rule of thirds as a general guide to just double check that things are generally lined up in a balanced way if you want. But there's also another method that's a bit more freeform and can feel more intuitive once you start using it. Plus, it's how you're going to break away from those conventional rules to create something unique while still having perfect balance in your shot. So you can download a free guide I wrote that lays this all out in detail for you. Just click the link in the description or pinned comment to get that. But here's the general idea. So imagine drawing lines between the main things you want the viewer to look at, or the things with the most visual weight. If you have 2, then it'll be a straight line. If 3, then a triangle, and so on. And then once you have that shape in your mind, you can then picture that shape placed within your frame, and you'll just instinctively tell if the scene is balanced or unbalanced. Like this place I visited one afternoon to plan out a sunset shot later that day. So this was my initial composition where I arranged the mountain, the church, and this valley in the frame. Now, the problem with this is that the large red roof in the bottom was dominating the attention in that area. So drawing a line from here to the church to the mountain creates this triangle, which you can see is not evenly balanced within the frame because the bottom corner is too close to the edge. It just feels off. Now, what I could have done about it, but didn't at the time, was plan to eliminate this red roof in Photoshop later, because then the thing with the most visual weight in that area becomes this building here. And drawing the triangle now, we can see it fits nicely and none of it's too close to the edge. Spreads across the frame evenly and just feels better. Now, if anything, there could be a little bit more room on the left side of the church before the edge of the frame, but this was a test shot that I kind of abandoned at the time anyway. I'm just using it here as an example. So knowing that the foreground was an issue, what I did was try to remove it by shooting from somewhere else, leaving just 2 main elements, the church and the mountain. Now, this road down in the corner is more of a distraction to eliminate now, but I'm not counting that. So drawing a line between these key elements, we can see the line is kind of floating a little bit to the left of frame. So to even that out, what we could do is either crop in like this. Remember, you're kind of doing this mentally in camera. If it's like a panoramic crop like this, or you're zooming in or moving around, I'm just using Photoshop to show you the idea here. But now the line is technically balanced, but it's almost horizontal and kind of leaves the foreground and sky feeling empty. And the only way to correct that using what we've got is to crop to a panoramic aspect ratio. For me, this is probably the best version of what this initial image is, just by using the method of visualizing the lines between the main elements. My favorite in-camera composition at the time was actually this one here, where I ended up sacrificing the iconic mountain in order to really focus in on the church against the general mountainous backdrop. Drawing lines between the center points of the main areas in this shot gives us a nice evenly spread triangle like this. Now, there is a fourth question in this equation, but so far we've asked and answered 3 simple questions. 1, what do I want the viewer to look at? 2, what can I add or remove? And 3, is the composition balanced? I left question 4 to the end because it's one that you'll be potentially asking yourself throughout the entire process, and that is this: can I do any of this in editing? Because unfortunately, sometimes it will be literally impossible to craft that perfect composition in camera. So allowing yourself the ability to do some cloning and cropping and editing will give you images that you'd never otherwise have got. But still, it's a good idea to think about the regular edits at this early stage too in camera, because with simple light, color and contrast adjustments in Photoshop, you can really manipulate and draw attention to some things and away from others to guide your viewer's eye through the scene. For example, if there are some small distractions in the scene like this, then they're probably not big enough to worry about cropping out of the scene in camera, because you can just clone them away easily in Photoshop. Or if the edge of the frame is a little bit too bright and drawing a bit too much attention, but you don't want to crop that area out, then just subtly darken it by masking a curves adjustment into that area. So you've asked yourself these simple questions, you've crafted a unique, balanced composition, and it'll all be for nothing if you can't bring the best out of your image in Photoshop. And for some reason, Adobe's hidden one of the best features for doing this away in a hard to reach place that hardly anyone knows about. But watch this next video and I'll show you what it is and exactly how to use it to give your landscapes an amazing sense of depth.